Hello to all future scientists out there. A warm welcome to all of you for a day of learning and discoveries. I am Teacher Ivy, your science teacher. Come and join me in this amazing class. Here are the goals for the day's lesson. First, determine the scientific method. Second, identify the steps of a scientific method. Third, appreciate that the scientific method can be used in finding answers and solutions to your own problems. How are you today? Hope you are all doing well. Before we start, make sure you have your pen and paper. When I was a kid and even now, I have so many questions in my mind like how plants grow, how birds fly, and how fish swim. How do you know the origin of those things mentioned and what are they made of? In science, there is a way in answering questions. Want to know what it is? It is the scientific method. Now, how do you usually solve a problem or answer a question? In my case, I analyze the problem. Think of the possible solution and try the solution if it is effective or not. Scientific method is the process by which science is carried out. The scientific method is like a roadmap that you follow to get to your destination. It is also like a recipe that we follow to come up with a delicious food. We can use scientific method to understand our world even better. Science is a way of thinking and a way of gathering knowledge about the world that is both accurate and reliable. The scientific method is a step-by-step procedures to help you solve problems and answer questions. When using a scientific method, the first thing you need to do is to make observation. Second, ask question. Third, make a hypothesis. Fourth, have an experiment. Fifth, record and analyze the data. Sixth, draw a conclusion. And thus, seventh, communicate the results. Let us elaborate on the steps of the scientific method. When using the scientific method, the first thing you need to do is to make observations. How are you going to observe? Observation is the process of getting information about the things around you. You have to use your 5 senses in order to make an observation. Sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of hearing, and sense of touch. Take a look at this picture. What possible observation can you make? One observation that you can state in this scenario is the tomato plant that is placed in an area with sunlight has a lot of fruits. On the other hand, the tomato plant that is placed on a shaded area has lesser fruits. After making an observation, the next step is asking a question about your observation. Your question will lead you to the problem. Either a question or a problem that needs to be solved is needed. You know the basic WH questions. Who, what, where, which, how, why, when. One of the possible questions that you can ask from our observation a while ago is, why the tomato plant located where there is sunlight have more fruits than the tomato plant located on a place where there is a little amount of sunlight has lesser fruit? The next step we need to do is to develop a hypothesis or formulate a hypothesis from our question. It is possible answer to the questions you have formulated. The hypothesis must be stated in such a way that it can be tested through an experiment and should contain variables. Since the hypothesis is a possible answer to the questions you have formulated or an educated guess. Variables are factors or parameters that we controlled, changed, or measured in an experiment. A hypothesis will also serve as your guide in designing your experiment. A hypothesis is usually written in the if-then format. The The hypothesis or possible answer to our question earlier is, if tomato plant is placed in an area where there is enough sunlight, then it will produce more fruits. Keep in mind that it does not matter whether your hypothesis is right or wrong. The next step that we need to do is to test or verify our hypothesis. To test if the hypothesis is correct or not, we need to design, develop, and perform an experiment. An experiment is a series of tests used to verify the hypothesis. Your experiment should contain all the variables involved in it. Variables are the measurable characteristics or parameters that it can be modified or changed in an experiment. There are three types of variables. Independent variable, which is the variable or condition that you can change in an experiment. A dependent variable, a variable or condition that you can measure or observe. And controlled variable, which is the variable that you keep constant or unchanged during an experiment. For instance, we want to test our hypothesis earlier, which is, if the tomato plant is placed in an area where there is enough sunlight, then it will produce more fruits. We will design an experiment testing the effects of sunlight on the number of fruits the tomato will produce. The independent variable will be the amount of sunlight. The number of fruits of a tomato plant will produce is the dependent variable. The possible controlled variable is the amount of water, type of soil, type of plant, and the size of pot. Aside from variables, your experiment should also contain the materials and the procedure that you are going to use. The experiment should also be repeated several times so that we can make sure that the first result is not just an accident. You will try your experiment to see if it answers your questions or not. And if not, you have to think of another hypothesis. The next part is recording the data and analyzing the results. Make sure to be detailed in documenting the results. This step is where you report, interpret, and explain what happened in your experiment. You may use tables and graphs in presenting your data and results to make it easier to visualize for your audience. Data are the information that you gathered in your experiment. The next part of the scientific method is drawing conclusions. It is the final answer to your problem or experiment. The conclusion is the summary of the results gathered in your experiment. This will give you the answer if your hypothesis is correct or not. If the hypothesis is correct, this may be the answer to your problem. If not, you need to repeat the experiment or think of a new approach to improve your procedures. You can also go back to the first step if needed. For example, the possible conclusion to our problem is, plants, such as tomato plants that are placed in an area with enough sunlight produce more fruits than those placed in less amount of sunlight. Based on this statement, we can say that our hypothesis is correct. If the hypothesis is placed in an area with enough sunlight, it will produce more fruits. After the conclusions, the final step is to communicate your results. You need to inform others about the results of your experiment. Professional scientists communicate their results by publishing them in scientific journals, presenting using a poster, or presenting at a conference. You can also share your findings just like the scientists. And those are the different components of the scientific method. These are: first, make an observation. Second, ask a question. Third, make a hypothesis. Fourth, testing the hypothesis through performing an experiment. 5. Recording and analyzing the results. 6. Drawing a conclusion. 7. Communicate the results. You may find another version of the scientific method, but you should remember that their purpose is the same. That is to find solutions to our problems in a logical and organized way. Indeed, in science, we can improve our knowledge about the world and how the things in it works, or why they work the way they do. At this point, the scientific method has been clearly discussed. I hope that you have learned something new today. Thank you very much.